The goal of this podcast is to help you break in and thrive in advertising. We do that every single week by sharing the stories and advice of those rocking it on the other side. And we're highlighting independent agencies, indie agencies this week. So we have on this episode Matt Heath. Matt Heath is the founder and chief creative officer at Partyland. Yes, that's the name of an agency. It's incredible. They've been around for about 6 years. It's been on my radar since they first started because of the name getting covered and then eventually the work. So you're going to want to check out their website to see what they've done. But you got to listen to this because Matt is phenomenal. He is a true creative, not just an advertising copywriter and advertising art director. He started off as in a band in high school, which got signed to a record label. He broke into advertising, and then he got poached while he was at 72 and Sunny to write comedy for Eastbound Down, the TV show with Danny McBride and Will Ferrell. So he was in the room with these stars, learning how to write comedy, writing comedy with them, and took those skills and went back to agency life, where he started later on Partyland. So it's a really good episode for any aspiring creative out there, or a reminder to us all that advertising is a legit creative pursuit. It's not just about making ads. So you're going to want to connect with Matt. Please do so. Listen to this episode. Give it 5 stars. We hope you enjoy. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. And as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. Indie Week on the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast is presented by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, the growth consultancy that's as invested in your agency's success as you are. So you've built something great. You've poured your blood, sweat, and tears into your agency. But if growth has stalled, if the industry feels like it's moving faster than you can adapt, it's time for a growth partner who's ready to go all in with you. Blood, Sweat, and Tears helps independent agencies stabilize, sustain, scale, or even sell with radical honesty, a custom strategy, and a team that actually has skin in the game. Co-founded by agency growth vets Nora Denuzzo and Eric Brown, they know what it takes to break through. If you're feeling stuck, frustrated, or ready to level it up, visit www.bloodsweatandtears.co. Now on with the show. All right. Matt Heath, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. How are you doing today, sir?
I am wonderful. How are you?
Doing well. Where are you calling in from?
Frigid Colorado today.
That's okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Are you a skier, snowboarder?
I snowboard, but not often these days. My kids are too little to tolerate the summit. So we spend more time camping. We're more of a camping family.
Gotcha. But they'll get there.
They will.
Cool. What do you say we start off before we even get anything? A little rapid fire questions. Off the dome here. What do you say about that?
Sounds great.
All right. What's your favorite ad of all time?
Oh God.
I know it's not a rapid fire there.
I'm not much of an ad person. I don't really like catalog them. I'm pretty notoriously like that happened and good for them kind of a thing. Unless it's stuff that like I've been involved with, at which point you have to become like moderately obsessed with it. Doesn't mean you have to like call it your favorite. I don't know, man. I don't really have one. Can I say I don't
Skip.
know?
Pass. Okay. What would you be doing if you weren't in advertising?
Probably teaching.
What subject?
Advertising. No, I don't know. I mean, I really love history. I was really interested in that. So probably a history teacher.
Gotcha. Best restaurant in your area?
It's a little burger joint called McDonald's.
Love it. What's your order there?
In my area, I don't know. It kind of depends. Like, I'm not much of a foodie. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be like obtuse and not give you good answers, but like, these are all things that like, I don't really think about very much. So
why is that? Is it mainly like being who you are as a like co-founder and CCO? Like, I mean, is a lot of the time like focusing on what you guys are up to?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you kind of get in a bit of a bubble in that way. I mean, it's not like I don't pay attention to advertising. It's just that like I don't catalog it.
Yeah.
I have friends in the industry who are like they just know everything. Like they're
Yes.
encyclopedias of marketing, and I don't I don't really think of myself. And this is going to sound really like like I'm patting myself on the back or trying to be like, sound cool or something like that. But I don't think of myself as like an ad person. I think of myself as a creative. And so I'm more interested in things that are not advertising because oftentimes, so much of the work that's out there in the world is just not very creative. And
Mm.
to me, it's just patently not very interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason why I started Partyland is because I wanted to make work that like, I felt was interesting and, that got me excited and that worked. I think that was one of the most unfortunate things about advertising is how much of advertising is just a complete flop.
Mm.
It's one of the fallacies. And I think part of the reason why so many brands don't invest in marketing like they used to is just because it just like, if you do it wrong, it actually is damaging to your brand and you waste money.
Right. And then long term, like you're spending money on that campaign or that ad, but then it also can reduce sales and can really hurt the brand long term.
Yeah, it's
If it's
just
not
like,
done right.
it's like it's confusing or it's not interesting or, it doesn't say anything about the brand or it tries too hard. I mean, there's just like good advertising is actually a really small target to hit. So
Mhm.
if you make a wrong hire and you don't bring on the right brand or the right agency or, you're the type of, marketer who likes to, helicopter parent your ad agency and you kind of push it to the place it needs to be without like, trusting them, like those kinds of things, like it can be, you can fail pretty easily. So it's not an easy thing to do, but when you do it right, or like it can be, special. So
Okay.
and really, really impactful.
So you obviously have a strong POV, and I think a lot of people share this sentiment. So it's not like a hot take. It's not an unpopular opinion. I've heard that quite a bit. So with that, you probably had your own uh, thoughts on how you would want to do this. So that's probably what led to founding Partyland.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get into all of that. But real quick, I want to then dial it back. Then I saw you went to Oregon.
Yep.
What point did you realize that you wanted to get into advertising, especially as not an ad person per se? You call yourself a creative. So how did that lead you to this specific sector?
Um, well, I grew up outside of Eugene, in Oregon on a farm, and it was out in the woods. It was a horse farm. We had, boarded horses there. And, so I spent a lot of time by myself. And, I didn't really have any friends that were nearby. And, you can't just like hop on the bus and go down the street to like meet your friends at a 7-Eleven and cause trouble. So it was more about like going outside and just being, fucking weird by yourself and like just being creative and I don't know, just like a little automaton out there in nature. And I think that in a lot of ways, in fact, I know, that really shaped, how I look at the world. And I guess like the most important thing about that upbringing is that you really understand like the harmony of things, and which I think led me into being a musician. Like, so I started playing music when I was really young. And I taught myself how to play, a handful of instruments, and I taught myself how to play guitar, and I started a band. So before I got into college, I was in a band that got signed to a record label when I was about 20. And so we
Nice.
toured around for about 4 or 5 years and played on the Warp Tour, and which might be before your time. I don't know.
No, yeah, no. That's awesome. I have never gone,
And
but that's
yeah,
so
yeah.
cool.
So it was really fun, and so so in that way, I really learned because I started playing music at such a young age. It's because I started writing music, pretty much right away. I have a very close relationship, an intimate relationship with my own creativity, which I think is really like one of the biggest bonuses or one of the biggest detractors for ad creatives, because, and this is getting to your point, nobody wakes up, when they're having to decide what they want to do with the rest of their lives, maybe when they're in high school or whatever, and says, I want to be in advertising. You know what I want to be as a marketer. Uh, so you really have to, so when you fall into it, which we almost all of us do, it's out of necessity, or maybe we tried something else and that didn't work. Or maybe it's an outlet. Like for me, it was the most logical way to make a living being creative, and having been a creative for almost my entire life, from like when I was like 10.
Yeah.
I knew myself creatively so well that it was never a struggle for me. So I think that some people, when they fall into advertising, they're just like, well, I can write or I can copy things. I can see, and like I understand the pattern and the logic of advertising. And they can go and they can, take what they've seen before, and they can, create something that is akin to what that thing is, because that was successful apparently. So I can just do that. And I think that's why so much advertising feels like, like it does. It's just, I think there's a lot of people out there who are at odds with their own creativity and haven't come to understand themselves in that way. And so they end up being creative tracers. You know what I mean? Like a comic book, like in a comic book drawing, it's like one person draw it, the other person traces it. And I think that that's, why I got into advertising, was because it felt like it was a true outlet for me to be a weirdo and continue to self-determine my own success as a creative person.
Gotcha. What, any fun band stories before we move on to the ad career?
Not for everyone else to know.
Gotcha.
We'll talk about that afterwards.
Nice, man. Got it. So then you chose advertising. How was that break-in process? Was it like pretty seamless? Did you have to go to portfolio school? Did you have to network your butt off? Like, what was the route for that?
So going back to the creativity thing. So I decided that I had a roommate after my band broke up. I had a roommate that I was living with who was in the design like school, or whatever you want to call it, direction. I don't know if they had an actual school for it at the U of O at the time, but he was in a design program at the U of O. And he at one point was just like, hey, you should really think about, getting into advertising, because I was not a designer. I don't think like that. My brain doesn't, like
it's a different ball game.
Yeah. But I can write. Or at least I try to. And so I went into the journalism track. It was the first year or two of Deb Morrison's career at Oregon. She was, Are you familiar with Deb? I'm sure if you've been doing this long enough, you've heard about her a lot.
She pioneered the track system. I think it was either at Oregon or Texas when she first pioneered that, where it would separate creative, account management, and strategy. And she made that blueprint for undergraduate education from, I think, that I'm not certain.
You know what? You would be correct. I was very, very fortunate to run into Deb at that school. She had just started there, like I said. I think I was in her first graduating class at Oregon. So,
wow, gotcha.
I learned from one of the best, and she was where most ad schools fall down is they teach you how to make ads. And I think that that's the complete wrong way to go when you're a creative. If it teaches you how to, teaches you how to copy. It's like, look at the award annuals and just do that, or look at the thing that they did at that agency. And if you want to work at that agency, just make stuff that looks like that. And I think any chief creative officer or ECD that's worth their salt can see through that pretty immediately. And what Deb did really well was she taught us how to not how to be creative, because a lot of us kind of come in with that in there. But even if we didn't know we were creative, she helped us find it and encouraged us to track down whatever outlet there was there. But she truly sees advertising as a creative process and not as a business solution, or as an opportunity for you to just get in and get a job. So, she is a very, very special teacher. And I credit, pretty much all of my success to like, that seminal moment of meeting her and her just being like, oh, you poor lost thing, come here, like I'll help
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, no, you bring up a really good point about like the copying and the way that, some people that are trying to break in do it. Uh, and Joe Staples was just on the episode that we posted today, and he was saying that he looks for like the love of being curious and like solving problems, but then also can you see that person within the work, like subtly, like
Yes.
their own point of view.
Yeah.
Um, that's still on brand on strategy, but I think that that's a tough thing for people to hear just starting out, for aspiring, like maybe they are in college, maybe they don't have a Deb Morrison. So what would you say to those people? Like, do you throw away the annuals? Do you not check lovetheworkmore.com? Do you need that baseline? And then do you actually just go out and do your own thing? How do you, like, what's a tangible wrapper for what we're talking about advice?
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why people have written full on books about this stuff, because it is such a complex thing, so I think the danger here is to be reductive to the point of oversimplification, or dismissive of all the things that like can matter to any individual person. But for me in particular, I preach a lot at Partyland that we need to be inventive creatives, right? Like invention, creativity is invention, and if you're just copying something, like you're just like what are you really doing? So we for me, I think I think Joe puts it right. Like you've got to see yourself in there, but you have to understand a little bit of the the construct of it. But we've all grown up watching commercials, so it's like if you're getting into advertising, you don't understand the construct of a commercial, whether it's a 30-second spot or just like a print ad. I mean, you get it as a human. You're just like we see that stuff and we recognize
5,000 a day.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't really believe that you need to like go and look at the annuals unless you need some sort of inspiration, but then you have to be really careful about ripping it off, right? I believe that like inspiration can be great, but you have to understand what you're inspiring yourself to do. Like for me, inspiration should be solely about motivation. It should never be about getting an idea from something, because that's borrowing, and that's not being inventive. So when it comes to like your portfolio and putting yourself in it, like I never look at the ads. Like I always go straight to the back of the book, and I know that that's been talked about here before, but I want to see what people make when there's not a brief sitting in front of them, when they're not required to make. It's like getting to know somebody on a podcast, right? It's like you start asking them questions and they go into business mode, and you lose they for some reason just like forget that they're human beings and just become marketing bots or business bots. And I want to see what people make when they're not when they're just inspired by whatever muse is inside of their brain. So that's the stuff where you can actually like see what somebody is when they can pick their own mechanism for showing their creativity. And like for me, Deb will murder me for saying this, but I didn't really have a portfolio coming out of school. I'd made some stop motion films. I'd never done stop motion before, and I'd never really played around in video much. Me and my creative partner back then, Cody Osborne, who runs an amazing production company now. He's a director called the Goondocks. We use him all the time, but he and I just made some like short films, and that was it. And we sent them to what is an agency that is no longer with us, called Wexley School for Girls. And it kind of made it for them, or at least the first stop motion film. And Ian loved it. Ian is now a good pal of mine. And he was like, hey, I want to hire you guys. But then I ended up going to College One show. Deb took our class to the College One show in, I think it was 2007. And I got that short film had been seen previously by the director of the internship there at JWT. And he saw it in the book. It's a longer story than that. It's like pretty magical actually. But the gist of it is his name is Jackie Hathramani. And again, one of those people that, I owe my whole entire career to, along with Deb. He saw it and he was like, oh, you did that. And I was like, yeah. So, I mean, this had nothing to do with advertising. This was just me making shit and just like finding outlets for my creativity. Again, going back to another thing that I say when we're looking for through portfolios and why I go to the back of the book is because I'm looking for prolific makers, people who can't help but make stuff. If I have to like pay you to make things, and that is the transaction that we have, it's probably going to be a pretty difficult, relationship between all of us, because if
you
your
saying to
motivation,
start, just
if your motivation is purely to just like transact like effort for money, like that's not going to be, it's not going to inspire you to be your most creative self, So anyway, so that happened. I got that internship, and then I had been in talks with Glenn Cole and John Boyler, who also went to the University of Oregon back in the day, and they had come into the school, and I introduced myself to them and forced them to look at my stupid little stop motion films. And I think Glenn looked at it and he goes, "What the fuck is this?" and he was like, "Well, that looked like it was really hard." And I said, "It was. It took days and days and days, like dozens of hours to make those things. I mean, they were like full 7-minute long, every 25 frame, pictures, complete with a whole soundtrack that I wrote for it." And and he was like, "Okay, well, so I was at the internship at JWT for about 5 weeks. I'd sold a couple of campaigns, one for Stride and one for Trident.
Wow.
And then 72 and Sunny offered me a job. And they were still very small back then. I think it was like 10 or 12 people in the office. I remember I sat in the internship or at the internship, I sat in the room with the HR lady at JWT, and Jackie, my creative director, was there with her. And she was like, "We are prepared to hire you out of the internship," because they had found out about the job offer from 72. And she was like, "We're prepared to hire you for $75,000. And this was back in 2007. And that was more money than I'd ever seen in my entire life.
Wow.
Having been like a poor, musician for, most of my life. And I think 72 back then, they offered me, because they were so small, I think they offered me like $25,000 a year. And so there was a big gap there. Especially going to Los Angeles, which is, even back then was not a cheap place to live. And I remember just being like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'm going to take this, $75,000 job. But Jackie, again, like in one of those miracle moments, he stopped her and told it, like, he looked at me and he's like, "Matt, don't take this job." And he's like, "Go to 72 and Sunny." He's like, "That's where you're going to, that's where you belong." I don't know how he saw that, other than the fact that he had worked at Crispin and had that pedigree. Yeah. But I mean, what he did in that moment, because I was just like, "Oh, okay." I mean, I was just a kid, I was like, "All right, I guess I won't do this thing here. I guess I won't take this money." And I even had, with the girlfriend that I was dating back then, like, we had plans to be in New York. Like, she had gotten into law school there, and like that was the plan. And I just blew that all up and went to 72 and Sunny, and ended up writing their first Nike spot, and which ended up, kind of opening the floodgates for a bunch of Nike business there. And then just kind of became, I was their first writer out of school at the time. So there was, just a handful of us, like Brian Rolls and Jason Norcross weren't even creative directors, and they were just senior creatives. So it was very, very early days, 72. It was a wild time.
Wow. Yeah, I think the main lesson there is don't chase the money. I've heard it time and time again on this podcast, and I love when this subject comes up. If there's a good opportunity where you're earn much more than you're gonna learn much more than you're gonna earn, take the learning experience. Especially when you got in early at 72 and Sunny. That's incredible. Like some of those stories. How long were you there for?
I was there for about 4 years for the first stint. I was the writer on a ad campaign that we did for K-Swiss that had Kenny Powers in it. Mm-hmm. They used Kenny Powers, and me and my partner at the time, well, he never called me his partner because he was the creative director and I was the writer. But he was the art director, but we were partners. I mean, come on. His name is Matt Murphy, and I love him dearly. He's the best. One of the smartest people I've ever met, and most creative too, by the way. He's like, you want to talk about somebody who is a creative being that just happens to do really great advertising. And Matt Murphy is a classic example of that. And then, so I wrote for those two campaigns. It was the first one where he gets signed, and then the second one where he becomes the motherfucking CEO. And then Danny McBride asked me to come write for the show. He said that you've written some of my favorite Kenny Powers jokes, like come write for Eastbound and Down. So I did. I remember he was just like, I don't want to get in the way of your advertising thing. I was like, are you kidding me? Like get in the way. And to Glenn and John's credit, like they were so gracious. You know, I told them, I'm like, hey, like I have this opportunity to go write for Eastbound and Down. Like what do I do? And Glenn was like, you fucking take that job. Like, oh my God, you go. And he's, you know, he said the door's always open. And so I got to go and really, you know, learn from the best. I got to write every day with Danny McBride and, you know, Jody Hill and, you know, and Will Ferrell, you know, those guys. Like, and I sat in writers' rooms, you know, and it was a very small writers' room. There's only 3 of us by the time I got there, which was about, they were just about, they hadn't even started shooting yet. So we were still writing all the episodes.
What were some of those like main differences, like in that room with all those comedians and stars and those writers compared to like the room in the ad agency, the conference room, or whatever it might be with art directors and copywriters? Like, did you see some parallels, or did you see some distinct differences in how they go about it? Did you take some of those lessons? Can you share that with us?
Yeah. I mean, up until that point, I'd only had a couple of experiences. I'd only been at JWT, which was an internship. And then at 72, which, you know, back then 72 we did primarily comedy. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was, you know, great design work, you know, like like we did for Bugaboo and for, gosh, I can't remember like what the name of that the original Microsoft iPod, what that thing was called. Zune.
I had one of those.
Yeah. You know, it was like, you know, really, they did really beautiful work. Robert Nakata was just like such a, you know, and still continues to be like one of the best ever to do it, you know, to pick up a stylus and a protractor in advertising and design the shit out of everything he touches. But there was mostly what we were doing. And I think just because Glenn and, you know, Jason and Brian and I, and, you know, and then Jake Kameth, who was my partner at one point earlier on, like there was just a lot of like people who were just like really good at comedy. So we did a lot of that. And I would say the main difference is the permission, I guess. Like I was really lucky because at 72, we had all the permission in the world to be selfish. And they hired very well for people who had strong points of view about what they wanted to make. Glenn to this day is the best that I've ever met at hiring people. Like the dude just doesn't miss when he I mean, I'm probably the biggest miss of his career in terms of like hiring people, but I mean, he's just like, I mean, like human after human, they have just grabbed and noticed and fostered and developed and, you know, pumped at, like they make the best ad creatives at that place and strategists too. I mean, all around, even count people. So that place is truly special. And they're really good at that. But I think the permission is different. Like it's longer form. So you're telling longer narratives because you don't have to, you know, worry about like what you're saying. I mean, you have permission to, you know, get as weird as you want within the world, you know, and the rules that are, you know, that have been created for that world. But I think it's like the writer's room itself is a really special place, and being able to like be in that room with those guys and like make, you know, the funniest people in the world laugh, like, you know, like seeing Will Ferrell laugh at your joke or having him pull you aside and just being like, hey, this monologue that I'm working, that, you know, for this scene where, you know, we're, you know, like where Stevie's being held at gunpoint isn't working. Do you have something else for me? And then like in the moment, just being like, oh shit. And like having to like write something on a piece of paper and hand it to him. And he's like, got it there on his lap while he's like delivering this monologue and using those as notes. It's like, there's something really special about that. And that you just don't get in advertising to that extent. Now you can certainly do that in production. You know, if something's not working and a director comes to you and is like, hey, this line just isn't working. You're like, yeah, I've already got some ideas for it. Like, let's try this instead. Like, so there is so much, you know, so many similarities in it, but I just think it, the mistake that the ad industry makes is that it is a diet creative endeavor compared to like the real stuff, which is like movies and TV. And the people who do it right don't see it like that. The people who do advertising right, they don't see themselves as like sub creatives to like the real creative endeavors. We see this as our own
Yeah.
opportunity to make the craziest, stupidest, funnest, smartest work in the world. So I think that's the biggest thing is there's a lot of apologizing in the ad industry for being in the ad industry. And I just don't see it that way. I don't think see
Love
that
it.
as necessary.
Got it. So then I kind of want to close the gap here. I know
Mm.
there's a lot that goes on from some stints back at 72. You touched down in Fallon for a little bit.
Yep.
Uh, TBWA Shy a Day. We do need to skip to when did you have the idea? Where were you at in the headspace when you had the idea for Partyland, or that you wanted to create your own thing? Can you walk us at that point real quick?
Yeah. I mean, like the base level of it is I felt like I could do it differently and better, which is the biggest lie I've ever told myself. But I'd had the opportunity to work at some of the best agencies in the world, and I worked at CAA under Jay Goodman and with a group of people that included people like Omid Farhang and Josh DeMarcantonio and Eric Stevens and Steve Peck and like Hector Moelas and Ricardo Viramontes. Like, I mean, some of the best creatives in the industry. And from that side of like marketing from like behind the entertainment curtain all the way to like 72 and Sunny, and then older ad agencies that have been around since the beginning and did it right from the early 80s, like Fallon, where I got to learn from Pat Fallon, and then going to Chiat and being able to be at an agency that, like, I think during that time was in a very it was an entropic time for them. There's a lot of entropy going on. It was organized chaos. They were like coming out of the Lee Clow era and going into like whatever was next, and they were still trying to figure that out. So I got to see how it was done right, and I got to see things that I wanted to fix, that I believed that I could fix. I started Partyland really because I wanted to, like, I just wanted to have fun for a living. And a lot of advertising, we get so bogged down with the responsibility of it all. And the, because we're a parasitic industry, we feed off of brands, we're parasites. So whatever a brand is eating and whatever they're feeling, like whatever, like, is going on in their body, we as parasites, like that gets into our brains. Right. And there's a lot of brands out there that are, not doing it right. And they're struggling, whether it's from like how to treat people or how to even like understand creativity and how to apply it so that their audience is delighted and excited about it. And I felt like I just didn't want to be sucking the blood of brands that, were toxic. And so we started the company really just to be able to pick and choose the people that we get to work with. And I believed that, if you call your agency Partyland, there's a few things there. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? It's like, you can't call yourself Partyland and not like have fun. Also, I just only ever wanted to do comedy. I was sick and tired of having to do schmoopy, pulling, people's heartstrings kind of ads, or, things that were like squinty, like no offense to like, sports brands, but like talking about effort and winning is just like, okay, like they did it really, really good at Nike and at Wieden and Kennedy, 25 years ago. And since then, everyone's just been kind of like chasing that. I think 72 does some good sports stuff for the NFL now,
yeah,
but
NFL's good. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I'm being, again, I'm like, there's lots of great stuff out there, but I just like, I'd have no interest in doing stuff like that. Like, I'm not trying to be serious. There's enough agencies out there who take themselves too seriously. So I wanted to do something that was just us taking our process and the job at hand very seriously, but the creative, but when I say process, I mean like, winning business and like making sure that the business that we, or the work that we do for that piece of business works. Like, that's very important. But like the creative process needed to be something that was more like a writer's room. And we just happened to be very, very good at comedy. So like leaning into that was a big part of it. And the other thing too is, I picked the name Partyland really because I wanted it to be a gate, like a gatekeeper in a
Like a
way, but
filter,
also, what's that?
like a filter for clients.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, somebody who takes themselves too seriously is never going to come to Partyland. They're going to be like, I can't sell. If I pick Partyland and I go to my CEO and I tell them I picked an agency called Partyland, they're going to think I don't take myself seriously. And I'm like,
Right.
good.
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 Then you know.
We will not have a good, like, it's not going to be fun. And then also for the brands that are just like, you know what, I want fucking funny. I want to love my job. I want people to love the work, our audience to love the work that we're creating. Like, where am I going to go? And it's just like, well, yeah, I mean, an agency called Partyland is always going to be on that list, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen it in the press for the past couple of years. On the ad trades, that's mainly what I look at,
Mm-hmm.
and that name just sticks out. And I remember when my last job at Havas Chicago, it was brought up a couple times. Like, we need to be doing work like Partyland, like the Dave's Hot Chicken. I believe that was you all. Is that correct?
Yep.
Um, yeah, I remember that coming up in conversations, and I'm like, that name sticks in my mind. So I know what I do want to hover over, like the pros of being an independent agency today. I think you kind of already hit it, that you can choose your name, you can choose the brand, you can choose who you want to work with, what the type of work is. Is there anything else like that we haven't really hit on directly about being an independent agency today? Because you've been at some of these holding company agencies, and
Yeah.
there's some benefits there too, I'm sure.
I have really strong opinions and
Yeah.
and lots of them about being an independent agency. Um, I think one of the most important things to realize about independence, right, is that there's some brands or some agencies out there that say they're independent, but they're only 49% owned, so we can still make our own decisions. Um, Depending on their contract, by and large, that's not true, right? If you're calling yourself an independent agency and you have any amount of investment into your brand, there's always going to be somebody else expecting something, right? You're never going to be completely independent. You're going to be essentially married to something else. Like they may not own you, and they may not drive you around with a remote control and make you make certain choices. But eventually, that money has to come back. Like, people invest in you for a reason. They invest so that they get something out of it, and that thing that they get out of it can't just be like the joy of being able to say they've given their money to an ad agency that's now successful. At some point, they want that money back, right? And whether that's a monthly 20K or whatever it is that they have to send up every month, or it's some sort of a handcuffs that you have to put on, or that you don't get to say yes or no to the agent or to the brands that you work with. Like, if you're owned 49%, by any entity, and some shitty brand that is going to possibly ruin your culture comes through, and you're like, you know what, no, I don't think I want to do that. They're going to ruin our culture. And then that investment company is going to be like, the fuck you are, they're yours now, like, you have to do it. And you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to not talk about that brand, and I'm going to put people on that stuff, and everyone's just going to rotate through there, and we're just going to make it as painless as possible and just ignore it. And it's going to be the thing that keeps the lights on. And so there's no way that ick doesn't get on the rest of the agency, right? So
It spreads.
so there is and I'm going to be a purist about it. Like, there is a difference between an agency like ours that has never taken one red fucking cent from any company before, and brands who are just like, we're independent, but they're owned 30% or 49% or even 51%, right? That wouldn't be, that technically isn't independent, but there's a lot of wiggle room in there. And I think that I just want to throw that out there. I think that's kind of bullshit. That. I think, and it's not real. And so when some brands or some agencies are like, we're independent, and then they sell independence as a thing that they do, that they don't have to do the things that owned agencies or holding company agencies have to do. It's actually bullshit.
I like that. I'm glad you brought that up. And usually what I'm talking about is not within the holding company system, but you're saying, even what's the big difference then if they have investment from a few angel investors? They still owe expectations, they owe something to somebody. But then you can even take it a step even further and say, well, is anybody truly independent when we're servicing clients? But I didn't want to take it that far. But
No.
I like what you're
You can. There's an answer there. Like, yes, there is a moment of independence. Now, everybody has some sort of God you have to worship, right?
Mhm.
When you start an ad agency, there's two ways you can go, and you have to pick which altar you're going to worship at, right? The one is money, and one is creativity. And I think that so many people go into this, starting ad agencies, where money is like at the front of their decision making process, and that's fine. That's a way to go. But for us, it was creativity, and it was always that. So if a brand came through and they were going to wreck, they weren't nice. Like, I mean, there was a brand that came through that was going to be a $3 million piece of business for us, like in year one, which would have drastically changed the trajectory of our agency at a very, at a very early stage. But the CEO of the company wrote a really nasty email to one of our employees, and was just like really condescending. It was just a straight dick about it. And we told him to fuck off.
Yeah.
And,
you can do that because you chose that pathway.
Absolutely. It had nothing to do for us. It's like, for me, at least, it's like, it's never been about the money. It's always been about like, how can we have fun for a living? I mean, I'll just keep saying that over and over. I mean, that's literally what drives me. I just want to play, and advertising with all of its structure and all that, strategy, which is very, very important at Partyland, a huge part of that. But being able to like, just breathe things into, breathe life into things, or dust things off, and, finding an old brand that, you can grab and dust them off and put them back up on their feet, and, kind of dress them up a little bit to be a little bit more modern. Like, those are things that we get to do that an agency that's owned doesn't. And so, yes, you're right. Nobody is truly independent when you depend on money, but we don't exist for the money. I think it was Phil Knight said, our brand doesn't, let's see, I'm going to butcher this, but he said something to the effect of, we don't exist to make money in the same way that a human body doesn't exist to make blood, right? Money is necessary for that organization to live, just like blood is necessary for humans to exist. But like, we don't put all of our effort into making blood as human beings. Just like Nike didn't have money on the front end of their decision-making process. It was about investing in athletes and changing, the world of athletics for humanity. Right. So Incredible. It's the same thing.
Love it. How can people find out more about you if they want to work with you, if they want to work for you? Is it Partyland, the website, the best way to go? Connect with you on LinkedIn? What do you say?
Yeah. Like, LinkedIn's fine. I mean, I'm notoriously terrible at like responding to people, and it's not because I want to be. I'm just forgetful. Yeah. So yeah, the website, that's a great place to start. We've got all kinds of, amazing people ready to, meet you and get going. Andy Silva is our head of, he's our managing director and partner at Partyland. Haley is our, head of new business, Haley Hunter. They're absolutely brilliant people. And we just brought on, we hired our first head of strategy, Sean McNamara, who's just like one of the most intelligent, bright, fun, delightful, refreshing people I've ever met. So, very good group of leadership at Partyland. If you can't reach me, you can reach them, or reach out to us on the Party line. Wonderful. On the website.
Hey, I know we could have talked for a bunch more, but I want to make sure that people can reach out to you, or through the ways that you just said, have those conversations. Check the website, check the past work. Our listeners know what to do, so I'm sure they will. But I really appreciate you taking the time. Tell me that story. I mean, I gotta find out what that band name was, and maybe it's on YouTube or something. But then don't chase the money as well. Like that was a huge piece there. Yeah. From and starting with your Partyland, like really cool stuff. I know you guys are gonna keep on crushing it. So thank you again, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Gino.
Yep.